this how-to, I'm going to show you how to create your own homegrown bush trip using Flightplan. I've opened the French D-Day coastline flight plan from simflightplan.com. You can download this flight plan yourself at simflightplan.com/download. But I'm not going to fly France. It's just close to Wales. And I heard that Wales has more castles more close together than anywhere else in the world. So let's do a Wales bush trip. It should be fairly short, so it's reasonable to do a video. I'm not familiar with the Welsh border, but this is all Wales here to the west of Birmingham. I know Birmingham is English, so the border should be right along here somewhere. I guess this is probably it. Let's start at the southern coast of Wales. Cardiff is Wales for sure, and I guess Gloucester is England. Here's a castle right here. So let's just drop a pin. We're not going to worry about airports right now. So I'm going to drop a pin, and let's say I want to drop another pin right next to it. So I'm going to make a big circle. So I'll just drop another pin here. And I'm not naming them at this point because I just want to measure how long our flight is going to be. So this is eventually going to be my first airport. I don't need Cherbourg. This will be my last airport, or my last waypoint before my last airport. We'll find airports at the very end. And then if I hold my shift key and select all the way to Cannes, I can delete all those waypoints. And now I just have my start and end. And what I'm going to do is work my way around Wales to find out how far of a flight I have before I start looking for sights to see. Let's zoom out again because we really just want an outline of Wales. And Liverpool's England. That doesn't mean we can't check it out. Birmingham. Presumably there should be castles all along the border of England and Wales. So that gives us our circle of Wales. And if we look, that's a 350-mile trip. So that's pretty reasonable for our video. I like to keep my individual flight legs around 100 nautical miles or less. So that'll give us at least 3 or 4 legs by the time we find our castles. That'll add distance to the flight plan. Let's change our aircraft to, let's fly the Cessna. And we're going to change the name to, and I had heard, I think on Discovery Channel, that there are more castles per square mile in Wales than anywhere else. So we should be able to find some castles. Basically what we've got at this point is what's going to become sort of my master bush trip, and then I'll break it into legs of about 100 nautical miles apiece. Let me go ahead and save since it's still the D-Day coast. Here, let's create a new folder. And now we want to find our sites. I think I want to find my sites before I bother with the airports. Give ourselves a little more screen real estate. And then we're going to want to zoom in now because we'll just follow our flight path and look for these castle pushpins. Now these aren't always castles. It could be any historical landmark. So what we can do is use Peggy here to see if the castle's likely large enough to see from the air. And I'm going to say that qualifies. We'll drop our first waypoint push pin right there. Now, the Cessna has a Garmin cockpit, and in recent versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator, the Garmin keeps changing the waypoint IDs. No matter what you name them, they end up being USR points. So I'm just going to save myself some aggravation and name them USR 01. 02, 03, all the way through for now. That way, when I load it up in the Garmin, it'll recognize it. None of the other aircraft will care what the ID is, at least that I've seen. I don't really care about the altitude. This is all going to be fairly lowland. I guess we could set it at 1,000 feet here, and from this point forward, it'll maintain 1,000 feet for us. We'll get Goodrich Castle on the way back in. Let's go this direction. Wow. Pretty sure we'll be able to see this. We'll drop a pin there. Now it's just going to be USR 2. And this one is Okay, and notice it kept our altitude of 1,000 feet because that was our previous altitude. So it'll hold that from this point forward until we tell it something different. That seems big enough too. So I guess the rumors are true that there's castles everywhere. Oh yeah, this qualifies. Okay, so I found about 30 castles, abbeys, aqueducts, various sites. I spent about an hour or so. I mean, you could go on and on and on. This is only the major ones that I had imagery that looked large enough to see from the air. You could certainly wander into England more or go more into the interior of Wales here that I didn't even check. I just sort of went around the outskirts. So we've got about 443 nautical mile trip that we need to now break into legs for our homegrown bush trip. We probably need to look at where our airports are. Again, I like to try and break it into 100-mile or less legs. So what you can do is use your mileage here to kind of look like here. We're going to end up at Castle Coke, and then it's going to be another 35-mile trip to Webley Castle. So that's probably a good place to find an airport. There's another castle I missed, but here's an airport. Well, let's find a starting airport. Since we decided to start over here, let's find a starting and then we can just end back at the same airport. Oh, there we go. And it gives us the ICAO code. Let's pick our runway while we're at it. Looks like 27. Yeah, we'll just put ourselves over here on the apron. And we said, oh, there it is. EGBJ is our ICAO, and it's going to be an airport. Let's move that up to our first waypoint, and then we don't need this anymore. So we'll get rid of it. And then actually we might as well go ahead and put an ending at the same airport. And we'll be coming in from the north, so we probably want that north-south runway. So we'll put our pin right in the middle of the runway. And again, it's going to be EGBJ. It is an airport. You need to be my last one. Now we're starting at Gloucester Airport and ending at Gloucester Airport, and we've got a nearly 500-mile trip here. So let's start breaking it into legs. So if we start at Gloucester and go to, I think, Cardiff, that'll be a reasonable leg. So we'll land in Cardiff. And we're gonna have to look up the ICAO code. EGFF. Is an airport. So that's our first leg. Then we'll go another 100-ish miles. Bet you there's stuff to see in here that I missed. Let's put Kidwelly Castle right after Webley Castle. I can probably zoom out. I'm done looking for sites. So that's pretty reasonable flight path. If we can find an airport in here somewhere, that's probably another decent leg. See, Webley, Kidwelly. See if we get lucky if there's a regional airport in here somewhere. More castles. Sometimes airports are easier to spot in satellite because you can see the runways. Alright, well, since we're having such a hard time finding airports on the map, what we can do is go into Flight Simulator, set our transparency real high, zoom way out, and then overlay world map, and let's make it daytime, and we'll zoom in on Wales. Oh, well, there's not a whole lot of airports, looks like. Let's see, where were we trying to find one? So ideally, we'd like something on this peninsula here, I think, because we're taking off from Cardiff. So really anywhere in here would be great. If we zoom in, there's Cardiff. There's actually 2 airports right here in Cardiff. We're taking off from here, and then we want to land Swansea. That's kind of a short leg. Let's see if we can find something up here. Yeah, there we go. And we're flying the Cessna, so we can land basically anywhere. This would be plenty. EGFE Haverfordwest. Haverfordwest Airport. Oh, it's a gray. That's why I was having a hard time finding them. EGFE. This is what? And since we've been struggling with the airports, we might as well stay in World Map in case we need more help. Let's look at what that does for us, though. That's another reasonable leg. We may arrange these castles to either side, you know, either before or after the airport. And then we're going to want another one here somewhere. Let's take a quick look now that I know we're looking for gray dots as well as the airport icons. This looks awfully hilly for a airfield. See, our last airport was here, and our route's kind of squirrely. Let's go ahead and move this Kilgarran Castle to right after the airport. And then, oh, I see. So these are after that. So we need to move this one out. Need to move this one is, oh no, we need to move it in to our leg, and we need to move, this would be probably the last one we want to hit before the airport. Yeah, that's a reasonable leg. And then we're taking back off from Haverfordwest. I've got that spelled wrong. Let's fix that. So probably the last thing we want to do before we break it into legs is zoom way out. Let me zoom way out. And see if we need to untangle some of this. We've been untangling our waypoints as we go, but you don't want to have to fly back and forth. Looks like maybe down here. This is kind of a mess. Well, but then there really won't be anything to see on this leg. So let's put this one all the way at the beginning. If you don't want to click the up arrow 30 times, you could have just deleted it and created a new one, but I don't mind. All right, and then we just got to flip-flop these two, wrong way, and that gives us a reasonable flight plan. So now we can see we've got a 464-mile trip, starting and ending in Gloucester, with airports evenly spaced or relatively evenly spaced. Looks like we could probably use another airport in here somewhere. So there's our Wales Castles bush trip. Now we'll save the main trip, and I'm not going to bother setting any of my flight settings because we're going to want to set those individually for each leg. But what I might want to do now is make sure my fuel tanks are full. Tips and tricks, you might want to make sure your center tank has fuel. I'm using the Cessna, which only has wing tanks, but if I decide to fly some of the sportier aircraft that only have center tanks, I'll start cold and dark. Well, I'll start running, but I'll stall after I run out of fuel. Okay, so now we've got a reasonable bush trip. Now we just need to break it into legs. So first thing I'll do is save my first leg, and if you follow what the standard in-game bush trips do is they'll just put a number after. So we'll create our 0 leg. I guess what we could do is put our leg number in there, so it's leg 1, and then this one's EGBJ to EGFF, which is, and then delete everything after Cardiff. And now we've got a 56-mile jaunt. Before you go into flight settings, you're going to want to save on each leg, because each time you save, Flight Plan checks what your first and last waypoints are, and then it sets your starting and finishing ICAO codes, your departure and arrival. So we'll want to select our runway at both ends, really. So in Gloucester, we're going to take off on runway 27. 27, no designator. And at Cardiff, we want to land at, we'll just land on 30. And I started out with a flight on the runway, so my first flight state is flight runway, but you'll want to make sure to leave that. We can check our time of day, 11 in the morning in the summer, ought to be lovely, and our sim is on the ground. So now this is a legitimate leg, so we'll go ahead and save it. Then we'll open our template. All right, so now we need our second leg. So we'll save Welsh Castles, and we've already done leg 1. So we'll go ahead and say this is leg 2 from EGFF Cardiff to EGFP, and we can delete leg 1 and delete all of waypoints after leg 2, and now we can set our starting and ending airports. Again, you're going to want to save after you delete your waypoints so that Flight Plan can detect your departure and arrival correctly, and it will also reset your latitude and longitude when you move your pin. In this case, we want to arrive at Pembrey, and we're actually coming in from the north. So we want to land on 22 at Pembrey, and we're going to take off from 30. We'll want to move our push pin to the apron. It's telling me it's an airport and double checking that I really want to move it, but it's also asking if I want the aircraft placed at this position. Yes, I do, which will reset my latitude and longitude, and then we can set our own runway number, which will cause Flight Plan next time I save to adjust the heading of my aircraft to be pointed as closely as possible. Well, it'll point me at 300 degrees, which will hopefully be straight down the runway, although that's not always the case. Okay, so leg 2 is not, yeah, it is Cardiff to Pembrey. That's it. So we'll say our departure and arrival runways, and then we go ahead and open our template, save to a new file, get rid of the waypoints that we've already visited, get rid of the waypoints after our arrival airport, save again so that Flight Plan resets my departure and arrival, and then rename it. Let's check Pembrey, and we want to take off on 04. And we want to land on, why are we coming in from that direction? Oh, I see. Okay. So we'll make it easy on ourselves and land on 27. I usually put my arrival airport pin in the middle of the runway I want to land on, so that if I'm flying a glass cockpit, that's where the glass cockpit will lead me, and if I don't switch to an approach. And again, just go back to my template. And when you're all done, what you'll end up with is, in this case, we ended up with 9 separate legs. We started out with a 466-mile circuit of Wales, which we then broke into 9 separate flyable legs, all flyable as a free flight. Now, we've created a homegrown bush trip. Let me zoom out. So here's our first leg, Gloucester to Cardiff. Open up the next leg, Cardiff to Pembrey. Open up the next leg, and then to Taliban, and so on and so on and so on. So now when you fly these, all you want to do is start with your first leg, These are free flights, so you're not going to see them in your bush trip menu. If you want to create your own bush trips, it involves getting into developer mode and doing some other things with Flight Simulator. If you want to go ahead and do that, I don't think you'd be able to add it to the bush trip menus, although I don't know that for sure. But you could certainly add it to the custom menu in-game. Flight Plan itself recognizes bush trips, and it has all the necessary data stored in the flight plan to create a multi-leg bush trip. But again, Microsoft Flight Simulator won't recognize it as a bush trip unless you do some other work in developer mode, I believe. The way to fly these is just load them as free flights. So I've opened our first leg from Gloucester Airport to Cardiff. I'm going to go into Cockpit Map, go into World Map, load save, find my bush trips directory I created at the beginning. Now I can load the entire template and fly the whole thing until I get tired, or I can fly it one leg at a time as we intended. So here's our first leg from Gloucester to Cardiff in our Cessna 172. And so now we've spawned in our first leg. You can see we've spawned on the apron, right where we placed our pin. It's giving us our heading based on the runway number. If I click in ready to fly, you can see it has our first waypoint loaded. Because we use the USR01 naming convention, we're not having a problem with the Garmin cockpit. You won't have a problem with any of the other cockpits. The Garmin's the only one that renames your waypoints. And you can see that our flight plan is loaded up in the glass cockpit with our arrival destination and our distances. So I'm ready to fly. So I can set my CDI to GPS and it will just lead me from waypoint to waypoint to waypoint, in this case castle to castle to castle, until I reach Cardiff. And then once I reach Cardiff, notice I'm in Gloucester here. Once I land at Cardiff, all I would do is load my next leg from Cardiff to Pembrey, go back into World Map, load my next leg, and now I'm starting in Cardiff, going to Pembrey. Once you've loaded that flight plan, now you're loaded on the apron in Cardiff on the runway we selected, and you can fly to your next leg. Now, as I mentioned, you don't have to back out to the main menu. Once you land on your runway at your destination, if you just hit the escape button on your keyboard, you'll see you've got the load save option here. If I want to fly my next leg, I can just land at Cardiff. Well, in this case, I'd be landing at Pembrey, and then straight from the runway on Pembrey, I can load up the next leg, and it'll just respawn you at that airport that you just landed on. Now I skipped a leg by mistake. We're at Haverford West Airport. But what'll happen is if you land, let's say you land and you end up coming to a stop over here somewhere, when you load the next leg of your flight plan, it's going to drop you wherever you set your pin in the direction for whatever runway you want. And that's how to create a homegrown bush trip from scratch. Typically we load these flights up to download. What I'll probably do is fly these each as previews and load them up one at a time so you can fly them yourself. Mostly just so that I can take a screenshot of some of the cool scenery for the featured image when I upload it to Sim Flight Plan. But as you fly them, if you take a screenshot, you can use your share button and share the flight plan up to the website for all your friends. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was informative. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.